You know, the Sisters of Social Service is no secondary organization to my father. The Sisters of Social Service was certainly one of my father's very, very favorite and beloved organizations. Actually went to the headquarters in Hungary myself with his suggestion. I was going to that part of the world for a short trip after college, and he said, "You have to go to Hungary. You have to go to see the social services where it all began," because his relationship with Sister Mary Ann was primary to his spiritual life, and I don't think that he would be the person that he is today, and without her, and without the dialogue between them. To find a soulmate like that, even in your own family, is incredible. And he was always amazed by the fact that this person who had so much in common with, who he shared, you know, the faith with, and a faith in action, and a faith in poverty alleviation, and a faith in serving children and multicultural communities, that here's this person that shares all of those things. And she's my sister. She grew up in this family. He was never short of amazement that he got to share his life with his sister. And so this celebration, I feel, is just as much for her life in a way as his. She was an intellectual powerhouse behind many of his ideas, and I'm sure him behind some of hers. I liked, Sister Simone, your metaphor of the roots, and particularly of the tiny things, the microorganisms really, that do some of that communication underground are really rich with metaphors. And I was thinking that my father often described us Americans as people who are living in the belly of the beast, right? We have that metaphor, which I think is very true. And despite the beauty of this building, it kind of reminds me of sort of a belly in that way. And I was thinking like, here we are, we're microorganisms in the belly of a giant beast. We're microorganisms with our own consciousness, as microorganisms do have. And we have our own consciousness, despite the fact that we live in this creature. We have our own ideas and our own ideas about progress. And we can get together, we can find air bubbles like this inside the stomach of the beast and live on the air inside that bubble and grow ourselves and grow our consciousness and reach perhaps the heart of the beast and maybe even the soul of the beast. Which is what Reverend Lawson, who's one of our greats, Los Angeles, suggested that we do at my father's funeral. Reverend Lawson spoke, and he said, we have to renew our engagement to dismantle the empire that we are in from within, and by using our soul force. And I think that my dad would have appreciated that very much. We are in the belly of a beast. We are spending $700 billion a year on military destruction of the planet. And of course, it's not just people that are killed, and it's not just human tragedy, but the planet itself suffers so greatly from these wars. 700 billion a year. And we have the smallest aid package ever. It's dwindling. Trump wants to make it smaller and smaller and smaller that we've had in our history. A few people, 5 or 6 of our richest people, own as much wealth as half of our nation's people. Of 150 million people, 5 or 6 people have more wealth than all of them. And defense CEOs are making $20 million a year, while Army soldiers are fighting and dying at 30, if they're lucky, $30,000 a year if they're lucky. So it's overwhelming, but of course we learn from my father how to get through that overwhelm. And it's by playing piano and smiling just like that. But never with denial. Never, let's forget about that and have fun for a minute. You know, it's bring that pain with you, bring the suffering with you, and turn it into a celebration of working against those things. He had a strategy that was very much based in music. It was based in songs, and I'm going to sing a little bit of these 4 songs that I think were at the heart and that he sang at protests and other places very frequently. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, to show our love. That's right. That was at the core, because you have to do that when you're in the belly of the beast to continue to survive as a microorganism with consciousness. You have to let your light shine, and doing so, you will realize helps others to do the same. And then Guantanamera, that song that mariachi bands always play, but it has in it the subversive core. Con los pobres de la tierra quiero yo mi suerte echar. With the poor of the earth, I wish to cast my lot. That's at the heart of it. So he's saying that often, and people think, why is he singing this little mariachi song? And then you realize the subversive core. This little light of mine also comes across as a lightweight song, and it's also core spirituality. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. I dreamed that they had all agreed to put an end to war. That song my father probably sang more than any as part of his protest speeches. And well, it's obvious how that song fits in. But the last song is Nicaraguita. And do I have still a few minutes? I'm wrapping up soon. I'll sing it with you. Ay, Nicaragua, Nicaraguita, la flor más linda de mi querer, abonada con la bendita Nicaragüita, sangre de Dirajen. Ay, Nicaragua, sos más dulcita de la melita de Tamagas. Pero ahora que ya sos libre, Nicaragüita, yo te quiero mucho más. Now I remember the last line is, Nicaragua, now that you are free, I love you even more. And when I sing that song, I always sing it to my dad. And I never realized that that could be as relevant as it is today, because now I sing that line to my father, now that you are free, I love you even more. He broke it down to one word, thank goodness. Everything. And of course the word is Latin, because I asked him on one of his last days, what's your most favorite Latin saying? Which you know is asking him what's the most important thing that's ever been said. And he wasn't ready for that, especially in the condition he was in. We were in an emergency room at this time.
You don't have to get
and he was suffering, and he had lost some cognitive abilities even during that time. He got this back, and they were back and forth. But I didn't even know if he understood my question. and I didn't know if he was responding, and he just sort of uttered one syllable, and then another, and then another, and I didn't know until the end of that one, until he started explaining that that was a word. And he said, because I asked him, and he waited a long time, and he seemed to he did close his eyes, and he went kind of back, and I thought he gave up on the question, and he just said, X, Zul, Tet. And then there was a long pause, and I didn't even know what that meant. And the word exultet, let us rejoice. That's what he said when he was at his most suffering moment. And that's what he suggested in his actions for all of us. Let us rejoice. He had a copy of the inclusive Bible. And this was one of the quotes that was most underlined and circled. Where you sow, there you will reap. If you sow in the field of the Spirit, you will reap the harvest of eternal life. Never grow tired of doing good. We will reap the harvest at the proper time. So while we, the living, still have time, do good to all. And I'm going to leave you with a little bit with something that he wrote. He started with a joke, because you're right, he always kept his spirit, his humor up. In fact, the one time he got mad at me, that I remember, he got mad at me. He said, I was sort of complaining about something that was happening in my life, and he said, don't ever let it get to your humor. Mad as can be, insisting on humor. It's awesome. But he started this with, we have found the answer to all problems. 985-5735.
818.
818, that's the phone number for KPFK. But he continued with this, and I'll leave you with this. And next week, we must vote. I think it was the election 2 years ago, I think it was. And next week, we must vote. Here we are. May voting be only one facet of our political life. We are living in an international crisis. Our politics must be present in our actions every single day of the year, not simply one day for voting. We know that fear is the motive force of corrupt government, and fear is now huckstered like popcorn. Perfect love casts out fear, says the good book. Fear is incarnate in the Nazi Party, the KKK, and all other hate groups. But courage was a key virtue to Aristotle. Without courage, we can do nothing. The Office of the Americas gives us the answer in the words of Joe Hill. Don't mourn, organize for peace on earth and goodwill to everyone. Thank you.